Hello, my pretties. We're back with another video for 1984. I told you before that there was a ton of movies and music from 1984. So let's just get into it. Usually I end up with 30 or 40 songs that I like or want to talk about. 1984, here we got over 70 out of the top 100. So it was, obviously it was a really good year. I don't know if I'm just biased because I love 80s, but 1984 was a banger year. So let's just get into it. You had Band-Aid with Do They Know It's Christmas. I was surprised that didn't make the list because it was such a big single for charity and all that, but it was written and recorded quickly in December of 1984 and rushed out for the Christmas season, and I'm sure it went to number one. I'm not sure if it made to number one in America, but it made number one all over the world. But it just wasn't out long enough to gain enough momentum to get on the top 100. But next we have Rod Stewart, who actually does have a song or two in the top 100, but other songs on his 84 album include Forever Young, which is a great one. Alphaville also had a song called Forever Young that was kind of big right at this same time. I'm not sure if it was actually 1984 or not, but that's a little confusing. The other Rod Stewart song is Some Guys Have All the Luck. That was kind of more of a poppy song. I was surprised to not see that on the top 100. UB40, Red Wine, Neil Diamond cover. Great song. I always hated that back in the day. Now it's just so ubiquitous and you can't hate that song. It's a great song. It just was a little middle of the road for me. Sade, Smooth Operator. Speaking of middle of the road, but they do it so well. I've always liked Sade, but most stuff that's that style, that light, jazzy, quiet, kind of almost adult contemporary stuff was just awful to me. But the older I get, the more my tastes change, and I got a larger affection for stuff like Sade and Simply Red and Culture Club and bands like that. It's crazy. I almost can't stand hardly any of the hard rock stuff that I used to listen to back in the day. And I just I want something smooth. I want something palatable that I can just ignore mainly. I know that sounds bad to say that about music, but it's just kind of where I'm at right now. U2, Unforgettable Fire album. Single was Pride in the Name of Love. Such a great song. Just they're just building up towards their Joshua Tree era, and it's just beautiful. A couple of 70s bands that were still holding over into the 80s. Alan Parsons had his peak a couple years before. 1982, I think, was Eye in the Sky, and that's just a masterpiece. He had several album length, like concept album, prog rock type of stuff through the 70s, and he got his start working at Abbey Road Studios. His name's on the back of the Beatles' Abbey Road album, and he was kind of the engineer producer on Dark Side of the Moon. So you can't get any more important than Dark Side of the Moon and Abbey Road. But their 1984 album was called Ammonia Avenue, And my dad's a huge Alan Parsons fan, so I knew this from when I was a kid. The single was called Don't Answer Me, and I didn't think it lived up to the hype of some of their older stuff at the time, but doing research for this video, I've listened to it, and it's a solid song. The other one I want to talk about is Jefferson Starship. They were at a pivotal point in 1984. They had an album called Nuclear Furniture. That the single is called No Way Out, and it is a great, great, great song. They had another single called Laying It on the Line, which was also good, but No Way Out is great. The thing that happened to them, since we're in the future now and we can look back, we see what's coming for Starship after this. And what happened was Paul Kantner and one half of the band wanted to just continue being a mid-level band, just writing songs and just plugging away like they did through the whole 70s. And Grace Slick and Mickey Thomas and a couple of the others wanted to just have outside songwriters and kind of, I hate to use the term, but basically sell out. They just wanted to be mainstream. And so after this album, Paul Kantner left and took the word Jefferson with him. Said they couldn't use the word Jefferson anymore, and that's why they became Starship. And just kind of went in the toilet with the next year, but we'll get to that in our 1985 list. But hopefully you know what song I'm talking about. Laura Branigan, 1983, she had the hit with Gloria, and she just followed that up with Self-Control in 1984. And it's not quite as anthemic song, but it's great. I've been listening to it. I didn't know that one from back in the day. I knew she had a few hits besides Gloria. But solid. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax. I know that was the #1 song. I was surprised to not see that on the top 100 too, but I think a lot of the reason for that is because it kind of got squashed in America because they say, come in there, do you want to come? And there's a lot of pearl clutching going on, and they kind of squashed that song in America. I think everywhere else in the world that song was just #1, humongous. They did have one other song after this, so technically they are a one-hit wonder because none of them got as big as Relax in America. In England and Europe, they had half a dozen songs. In the U.S., the only other one that even came close was a song called Two Tribes. Two Tribes Go to War. It's a good song. Good song. John Cougar had added Mellencamp back to his name. And the album came out in 82 or early 83, and he had a few singles off of it, but it was such a huge album. He was still having singles in 1984. The Authority song was the biggest one. Lyrically, it's kind of I Fought the Law and the Law Won. Musically, it's almost the riff from Footloose, and it's got that groove that I just don't like as much, but it's a good solid song. I listened to it recently, and I didn't hate it. David Gilmour had a song that charted called Blue Light. Kind of unusual. I didn't expect to see that. Irene Cara had her last hit called Breakdance. She was famous she did Fame in 1980 and the Flashdance What a Feeling song in 1982 or 83. I think this would have been her last charting song. Queen, I Want to Break Free, and Radio Gaga were the two big songs that year. Shaka Khan and Rufus, Ain't Nobody Love You Better. I always thought that was a 70s song, but I guess not. I think it actually came out in 1983, but hit the charts in 1984. I think it might have been in a movie, I'm not sure, but a million people have sampled that since then. Shaka Khan also had a solo hit with the Prince song I Feel For You, which is why I thought all that Rufus stuff was from the 70s, because I knew she was solo in the 80s, but apparently that's 84 was a big year for her. I Feel For You is a great song. I like her version actually better than the Prince version. Philip Bailey and Phil Collins, Easy Lover. I didn't know who Philip Bailey was at the time because, like I said, I was a heavy metal kid, a rocker, so I didn't know a lot of Earth, Wind, and Fire. But I was like that song. It kind of has some heavy guitar in it, cool groove. Phil Collins was just on fire in the early and middle parts of the 80s. He was everywhere. He was kind of the Dave Grohl of the 80s, playing drums on people's stuff and doing his own songs and guesting with people. And Easy Lover, great song. I was surprised not to see that in the list up here too. Depeche Mode's first song, People Are People. I don't know if it actually charted or not, but they will be coming around bigger here in the next couple of years. Slade, on the back of Quiet Riot getting a big hit with Come On Feel the Noise, they actually released their biggest album in the US called Keep Your Hands Off My Power Supply, and they had a couple of songs on there, one called My Oh My, which is a great sing-along song, and then more of a up-tempo song called Run, Run Away. And the guitar part has a cool little, it reminds me of a bagpipe lick that's Run, Run Away. I loved that stuff when I was younger, and I put those back on my playlist for this video, and I just can't stop listening to them. It's great, great, great. Oh, there was a guy named Tony Carey. I think he was the keyboard for somebody, keyboard for Rainbow or something like that. I'm not sure. I didn't really look up where he came from, but I remember he had a song called Fine, Fine Day that's just, it kind of goes against stuff that I normally like because it's a story song and it's kind of sad and I don't know, just a great song. Kind of affected me when I was a kid. There was a side band from Boston, not from the city of Boston, but from the band Boston, since they were in their period of it taking 10 years to put out their next album that still hadn't come out yet. So a couple of the guys had broke off and did their own band called Orion the Hunter. I've always heard that band name. I never realized that it was a Boston adjacent band. A song called So You Ran. As an epilogue to the Michael Jackson Thriller era, we had Michael getting back with his brothers doing the Jacksons Victory Tour, and they had a song called State of Shock. I think that was the name of the album too. That was fairly big. It was the last time he would perform with his brothers in that capacity. And we also had Weird Al jumping on the bandwagon and having his first big, huge era with Eat It. And I'd almost, at this point, I'd almost rather listen to Eat It than the original Michael Jackson song. I've got Head Over Heels written down here, and first thing I think of when I think of Head Over Heels was Tears for Fears, but that wasn't until 1985, so I got to thinking, that's the Go-Go's song. The Go-Go's had a song called Head Over Heels, and completely different groove. One of the last big hits for them. Def Leppard, after the hugeness of Pyromania and all the hits they had from that, they re-released their High and Dry album with a lot of added keyboards. Fun fact, all those keyboards were played by Thomas Dolby, which they kept that kind of thing quiet because Thomas Dolby was more of a new wave pop artist, and they wanted to keep that stuff separated from the hard rock because hard rock fans might not have accepted the fact that Thomas Dolby, the She Blinded Me with Science guy, was playing keyboards on their hard rock album. The same thing happened with Van Halen with I'll Wait. They just left Michael McDonald's name completely off of that because who wanted that adult contemporary yacht rock guy on your Van Halen record? It was bad enough they were doing keyboards, but that it was done by Michael McDonald. So anyway, Def Leppard recharted with Bring It On the Heartbreak, which is one of my favorite Def Leppard songs of all time. There were only 5 #1 albums in all of 1984. Thriller just ruled the roost until April, and that signified just the end of the Thriller era. You had the Footloose soundtrack that dominated several singles. The album was #1 through all of June. Then Huey Lewis in the News. Sports was #1 for 1 week. Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA was #1 for all of July. And then in August, Purple Rain just took it to the end of the year. That's kind of interesting, I thought. It just shows on the charts the changing of the guard right there. And without any further ado, we'll get into our year-end Hot 100. At 99, we had Billy Squier, Rock Me Tonight. This is the song that everybody says destroyed Billy Squier's career because that video was kind of prancy, Nancy Prancy, and he's wearing a pastel shirt and just tearing his shirt off and then. But in my mind, I don't know, I was still just a preteen, but in my mind, he's dancing around like he always did. I mean, he doesn't have his rocker guitar and all that stuff, but still made it into the top 100, and you see all the humongous songs that don't even make it into the year-end top 100, so it was his last big charting hit, but I don't think it was that video that killed it. I hate that narrative. Anyway, moving on. Number 98, Night Ranger. Which is technically a hard rock band, but they did really good with ballads. They kind of started that whole hair band getting big with the ballad thing. They just kind of proved that that's the way that you cross over into the pop territory. Song was When You Close Your Eyes, which I still think is their best ballad. It's got great solos, great vocals, the writing is amazing. 97, The Cars, Magic. They could do no wrong that year. They had that Heartbeat City album and just several hits off of it. 96, I talked in the One Hit Wonder video about Peter Schilling's Major Tom, kind of the answer to Space Oddity. 95, you had Duran Duran with New Moon on Monday. It's not my favorite Duran Duran. By this time, they had already started getting away from their first two albums were my favorites, but still solid stuff. 94, On the Dark Side from the Eddie and the Cruisers, John Cafferty and Beaver Brown Band. 93, Rolling Stones, Undercover of the Night. Who knew that the Rolling Stones would still be able to have hits into 1984? It's like the first of people realizing that these periods of bands don't have to end like the Beatles or Led Zeppelin or all the punk rock stuff or all of the stuff from the 60s or 70s, that a band could have like some super longevity. Rock and roll wasn't a infant anymore, so good for them. Undercover of the Night was the song I remember seeing the video of a lot, and it's kind of dark. I don't remember this. I don't really remember if the song was that dark. I think it was. I think some of the lyrics are dark. I remember there's sounds in there that sound like gunshots. I don't think it is. I think it's a reverb drum thing, but it always reminded me of gunshots, and it just always seemed so, like South American coup, like soundtrack to a South American coup or something. I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense. Number 87, Rat, Round and Round. Here's when you had your first hair band stuff crossing over into the mainstream. 85, The Police, Wrapped Around Your Finger. Probably my favorite of that era. Synchronicity came out in 83, I think. But they were still having hits off of it. Every Breath You Take was a humongous single from 83, but I think Wrapped Around Your Finger I like a whole lot more. 81, John Lennon, Nobody Told Me. 4 years after his assassination, he's still his second posthumous album, Milk and Honey. Nobody Told Me. Not near as good as some of the songs off of Double Fantasy, but still cool to see. 79, Madonna, Holiday. That would be in her first hit, I think. Riding High again after all of her other singles that she had. 78, Thriller, still on the charts. 76, the Pointer Sisters with I'm So Excited. Not my favorite stuff from that time, but it's a fun song. Probably been in too many movies whenever they need that energetic thing. It just kind of fits that cliche a little close. 74, Wang Chung. Everybody remembers the Everybody Wang Chung Tonight song. That was a few years later. This was their first big hit called Dance Hall Days. And I don't mind it. I think it's a cool song. Kind of gets stuck in your head. 73, Bananarama, Cruel Summer. I love that song. Apparently it was in the Karate Kid movie. They didn't really push it as a single, even though it was kind of the year of the soundtracks. I'll talk about that in the movie videos. But Cruel Summer, man, it just sounds like sweating. I don't know what it is about it. I wish I could capture that. I wish I could capture in a bottle that feeling, because just love it. 71, I talked about in the One Hit Wonder video. Tracy Ullman, They Don't Know. They don't know about us. 68, Quiet Riot, Come On Feel the Noise, yeah! First heavy metal album to go #1. That's only because Def Leppard was held at a #1 by several people. Michael Jackson, George Michael, Whitney Houston, whoever was huge in '83. That's awesome to see that was big enough to make it into the top 100. 67, Cover Me by Bruce Springsteen. Not a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. That one has kind of a rockin' guitar thing and a super catchy chorus. A lot of the songs on the Born in the USA were just destined to be hits. Next, more Madonna. 66, Lucky Star. 65, more Cars, you might think. 64, Huey Lewis, If This Is It. Not a huge Huey Lewis fan, but I do like this one. It's kind of more of a doo-wop 50s style. 60s, ZZ Top, Legs. The MTV age, man. Between the beards and those guitars that spun around and the car and the girls, they just they knew how to capitalize on that whole image and everything. And who knew, if you 5 years before this, you would never guess that ZZ Top would be one of the huge MTV bands. Everybody always says something about people getting signed because of the way they looked, and the image became more important than the music. And it just shows you that you can do that without being a pretty boy. 59, from the Footloose soundtrack, you had Almost Paradise. Great ballad. Mike Reno from Loverboy and Ann Wilson from Heart. Their voices just blend so well together. Two of the great 80s singers. And really, really great, well-written ballad. 58, I already talked about Rod Stewart, Infatuation. This is the one with, oh shoot, I can't remember the model's name that's in the video, but this is the one that has Jeff Beck playing the solo. And back in those days, I had no idea the influence of Jeff Beck, but now I just... he's probably one of my top 3 favorite guitar players. And I had no idea their history either, so I thought that's kind of cool. At the peak of Rod Stewart's success there, again in the 80s, he got back with his old buddy Jeff Beck. 57, Pat Benatar, Love is a Battlefield. She just had been knocking hits out left and right since the late 70s, but Love is a Battlefield just put her on another level. And she did the same thing. She had the image, she just became 80s just overnight. Her earlier videos, they tried to do more conceptual things when they didn't really know what to do with videos. And there's some concept stuff in the Love is a Battlefield video, but she's dressed like Madonna in that video, and they're doing the dance, the 80s dance. Beautiful. 56, get some more old fogies. Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers duet with Islands in the Stream. And you can tell that adult contemporary people were buying a lot of records back then, because in this hardcore 80s climate, for that song to make it to number 56 is kind of amazing. 55, Huey Lewis, I Want a New Drug. We'll talk about the Ghostbusters thing when we get up to that song a little more. 54, Elton John, another 70s guy, still having hits all through the 80s. Sad songs say so much. 52, more Phil Collins. I think That's All is actually a Genesis song. So he had solo stuff and Genesis stuff on the charts at the same time, plus duet stuff. Oh, I just can't stress enough how amazing Phil Collins was in the 80s. 51, Billy Ocean, Caribbean Queen. Not a huge fan. I kind of put that somewhere between R&B and yacht rock. It goes on my yacht rock list. My dream yacht rock band would probably play that song. Number 50, another duet by a couple of old fogies. Willie Nelson and Julio Iglesias. I keep wanting to say Enrique Iglesias. Julio Iglesias, To All the Girls I've Loved Before. Like I said, I never cared one way or the other about that song, but I'm more open to it now. 46, Scandal, The Warrior. It's come out since Eddie Van Halen died. People come out with their little stories and stuff, and after she had a big hit in 1984 with The Warrior, and David Lee Roth left Van Halen in 1984, they were just asking everybody if they wanted to come try out to be the new singer of Van Halen. So there's a bunch of people. Steve Perry from Journey was kind of on break from Journey, and they asked him, and he said no. And they asked Patti Smythe, and she was good friends with Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli, and they asked her, and she said no. So that's kind of an interesting. I'd like to see a list of all the people they asked or that actually tried out before they got Sammy Hagar. 45, Chicago was deep in their adult contemporary David Foster era with the Hard Habit to Break. Prom songs. You can keep it. Nothing like the early Chicago rock and roll stuff. Sad shadow of what that band used to be. 44, more Huey Lewis. Heart of Rock and Roll, still beatin'. 43, Duran Duran, Union of the Snake. 41, The Cars Drive. I would have expected that song to be a lot higher than that. Drive was just such an... it's probably got to be top 5 80s ballad. 40, speaking of 80s ballad, you have Night Ranger with Sister Christian. That's probably their biggest song of all time. Me and my friends always thought that song was a little schlocky and cheesy. But I'm listening to it now, and it doesn't bother me near as much as it did back when I was a little more pretentious. 39, Billy Joel, Uptown Girl. Ugh. Another artist that was great in the 70s and then just lost the plot in the 80s. I get it, you married a supermodel. The Uptown Girl is just terrible. I hate all of that doo-woppy stuff he tried to do in the 80s. Tell her about it and all that crap. 38, Eurythmics, Here Comes the Rain Again. Great song. Love that band. 37, Billy Idol, Eyes Without a Face. Probably his highest charting original. I know Moni Moni was bigger than that a couple years later. But Eyes Without a Face, another band showing that ballads are the way to get on the charts. 36, Corey Hart, Sunglasses at Night. Another one-hit wonder. But technically not, because he had another song called Never Surrender, which actually charted higher than Sunglasses at Night. Just, I don't think it had the longevity that that one did. Sunglasses at Night, just, it's got to go on anybody's list of 80s one-hit wonders, or 80s songs in general. Everybody loves that song. 35, Borderline by Madonna. That's my favorite early Madonna song. Oh, so good. It just gives me nostalgia just thinking about some of these songs. 34, Cyndi Lauper, She Bop, was on the PMRC's Dirty 30 list, because they're talking about masturbation. She Bop. Whatever. 33, Elton John again. I guess that's why they call it the blues. I always thought that song was a little cheesy. It's alright. 32, Lionel Richie, Stuck on You. I don't even remember that song from back in the day. I've known about it for a few years because I had a friend that played it for me recently, but I knew all his big hits, but Stuck on You, just I don't remember that song. It just was not in my was not on my radar back then. 31, speaking of Steve Perry, had a huge hit with Oh Sherry, and I always thought that song was kind of cheesy. He's always a great singer, but Journey had kind of peaked with the For Frontiers album and all of the singles off of that, so they were taking a break from each other, and he went off and had another big hit. I never realized it was that big to get to be 31 over the whole course of the year, but 30, Sheila E., The Glamorous Life. Another Prince protege. 29, Dan Hartman, I Can Dream About You. That's the biggest thing to come out of the Streets of Fire movie. I always loved that song, and it always confused me because I remember the video from back in the day, and the band that plays it in the movie that lip syncs it is kind of a black doo-wop group, and so I thought that was who the artist was. Who knew? I found out years later that it was the guy from the old Edgar Winter group. He wrote some of the Edgar Winter stuff in the 70s, Free Ride and songs like that, and one-hit wonder on his own in the 80s. Who knew? 28, Nina, 99 Red Balloons. I said in the one-hit wonder video that the German version, 99 Luftballons, actually charted higher than the English version. After it charted really high, they re-released a English version real quick to kind of capitalize on that, and people like the German version better. Go figure. 27, another one from the one-hit wonder list, Matthew Wilder, Break My Stride. Ain't nothing gonna break my stride, ain't nothing gonna hold me down. Oh no, I got to keep on moving. It's kind of like Cartman when he hears Come Sail Away and he has to sing the whole thing. Whenever I think of that song, I have to sing that whole part. 26, Rockwell, Somebody's Watching Me. 25, Stevie Wonder, I Just Called to Say I Love You. An okay song, but it's like they say in the High Fidelity movie, go to the mall. It's another great 70s artist that just kind of just petered out in the 80s, just making schlocky, radio friendly, low effort stuff, seems. 23, Thompson Twins, Hold Me Now. That's probably one of my favorite 80s songs of all time. 21, Prince, Let's Go Crazy. Yes, let's get some Prince in here. I had no idea that was the song. That song would have charted that high as a hard rocking song with a crazy guitar solo and all that stuff. But I think it was first. I think that was the first single. So everybody was hyped for the Purple Rain stuff. And that song was huge. 19, The Romantics, Talking in Your Sleep. Kind of the foundation of what's that Bruno Mars song? It's basically the same thing. It's Locked Out of Heaven. The chords and the feel of it and everything. Number 18, Pointer Sisters, Jump for My Love. They had to add the For My Love because of Van Halen's Jump, but we'll get to that in a minute. 17, more Cyndi Lauper, Time After Time. Another one of my favorite 80s songs and one of my favorite 80s ballads of all time. I have to say that one probably is number one. Number 16, more Duran Duran, The Reflex. I never liked that song very much, but whatever. I love Duran Duran. Number 15, more Cyndi Lauper, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. She's just back to back right there on her big songs. 14, Bruce Springsteen again with Dancing in the Dark. Doing the 80s dance. Courtney Cox in the video. That was the first one, I think, from the Born in the USA 1,000 hits that he had off that album. 13, from the Footloose soundtrack, Denise Williams, Let's Hear for the Boys. I hope I put that in the One Hit Wonder video, because that's definitely a one hit wonder. 12, All Night Long, Lionel Richie. 11, John Waite, Missing You. Another one. There's just so many good 80s ballads, and they were all this one year. I'm going to have covers of a lot of these songs up here real soon, too, so keep a watch on my Oddbender channel for that. Number 10, Culture Club, Karma Chameleon. As a metalhead and a rocker, I was not allowed to like that stuff back then. But like Bill Burr talks about that a little bit, about being a metalhead, and it's like, we're like, oh, look, he's gay. He's gay. Look how he dresses and all the makeup he's wearing, and then we'd turn around and listen to Twisted Sister, where he has the exact same dumb makeup and dumb hair and dumb clothes. Makes no sense. But there was guitars. Those crunchy guitars. Oh, Culture Club is amazing. Someday I want to do a deep dive on them, because they're great. Number 9, Ghostbusters, Ray Parker Jr. They had asked Huey Lewis to do the soundtrack to Ghostbusters, but they had already getting ready to do the soundtrack for Back to the Future, and I think they had another song on another movie, so they didn't want to become the soundtrack band, so they said no, and they basically just took the template of their song, I Want a New Drug, and it became Ghostbusters. They sued and settled out of court, so who knows whatever came of that, but yeah, you listen to those two songs back to back and you can really, really tell. Alright, we're in the top 10 now. Number 8, Yes, Owner of a Lonely Heart. Great, great song. It wasn't even supposed to be called Yes. You could almost call that a one-hit wonder too, because they had some other hits off that 90125 album. I always want to say 90210. The 90125 album. But it actually came together as Trevor Rabin and Chris Squire were trying to put a band together called Cinema. Chris Squire, Trevor Rabin, and Alan White. So 2 out of the 3 were Yes guys, but they were going to be called Cinema. And then John Anderson came along and started singing some and writing with them. And then they ended up getting Tony Kaye, old Yes keyboard players. So it's 4 out of the 5 guys were Yes. The record company kind of just almost made them call it Yes. And they did the same thing a few years later without Chris Squire. So it makes me seem to think that he owned the name, because the Anderson, Buford, Wakeman, and Howe was basically the classic lineup of Yes without Chris Squire. And he did not allow them to use the name. So yeah, Owner of the Lonely Heart, they were more of a pop direction than their 70s prog stuff. They weren't doing album-long epic pieces. So it really kind of almost shouldn't even be called Yes, but it is what it is. It actually led to a little bit of controversy a few years later when they were touring with Steve Howe. And in Europe, all the promoters were saying, you guys need to do that song. That's your biggest hit. That's your biggest song. And they're like, that's not the band that we are. And whatever keyboard player they had at the time worked out a way to do all of the interesting effects, guitars, and the solo and all that stuff on keyboards, because Steve Howe just played different than Trevor Rabin, and that's just not his style. So they just did the rock part riff. They just did the rock riff at the beginning. Keyboard player covered all the rest of it, so they were able to make the promoters happy. I can't remember that keyboard player's name, but yeah, he kind of saved the day for them in their later days. But number 7, another Lionel Richie. Hello. A lot of people, when you say hello now, they go into the Adele song, but in 1984 it was Lionel Richie. Number 6, Van Halen, Jump. It's a coup to have a rock band in the top 10. It just doesn't happen very often. Granted, it was their super keyboard song, so from the outside you could almost say that they sold out, but it was the natural evolution of the band. I don't really believe in that selling out term. I'm going to do a whole video about that someday. It just drives me nuts. I hate that term. Jump, biggest song Van Halen ever had. Number 5, Phil Collins, Against All Odds. Once again, top 5 favorite 80s ballads. Number 4, Kenny Loggins, Footloose. Kenny Loggins, speaking of soundtrack bands, between that and a couple years later doing Danger Zone for Top Gun, and he did Caddyshack, I'm Alright. A couple years before that, he kind of was the soundtrack guy. Footloose, not my favorite song. It's got that 80s groove to it. 2 things that always made me happy about Footloose is seeing a local guy, Todd Cooper, always played that in their 80s band with such exuberance. It made me like it more than the original. And my daughter's mother that loves 80s stuff, whenever she hears that song, her eyes get real big and she gets up and does the Molly Ringwald dance, and that always made me really happy. So I can't say I hate that song. Number 3, Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, Say. Another one of the great 80s songs. That's one of my favorite 80s songs, and way better than the duet they did on Thriller. They did The Girl Is Mine on the Thriller album, and I think that song is garbage. But Say is a lot of fun. It's interesting to see how Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney sing so different and write so differently over the same first part. So like you got one part and then the other guy sings the other verse, and I don't know. Can't say enough about that song. Number 2, What's Love Got to Do with It? Tina Turner. I had no idea in those days how much of an icon that she was becoming and how big of a deal that was for her to be making a comeback right then. But yeah, she'd been through so much shit. She came back just swinging. And once again, another 70s, 60s, 70s artist that just proved that the 80s was still a good ground for them to just have a solid career. And after that Private Dancer album, she just was everywhere through the 80s. So the number 1 song of 1984 is When Doves Cry by Prince. Like I said, first part of the year was still Michael Jackson territory, but the last part of the year was all Prince. I think Purple Rain came out in July of 84, and he just dominated from there on out. So anyway, that's my list. We're going to try to knock out the last of the 1984 stuff and then move on to some other things. 94 is almost just as big of a year, so be prepared for that too. Anyway, catch you later.